Hello everyone. Myself Dr. Harbinder Singh, Associate Professor, EC Department, Chandigarh Engineering College, Landra, Mohali. In today's lecture, I will discuss that how to write a good scientific article for international journal. A successful production of a written product from submission to a peer-reviewed scientific journal requires substantial efforts. The purpose of this lecture is to offer practical suggestions for achieving success when writing and submitting manuscript to the international journal. The topic I am going to cover in this lecture are: what is your reason to publish? Second, basic technique of research article writing. Third, journal structure of a scientific article. Fourth, getting started, means that how can I start research article writing. Fifth, length of the manuscript, important aspect which is depend upon the journal itself. And the next is top 5 reasons for rejection of the paper, and the last is we will conclude the lecture. First, we should have reasons to publish the article. So the first point I have taken, that is you have some results that are worth reporting. So if you have some results, then you can start writing your research article. Second is you want to progress scientific thought or improve any technique. So it is basically depend upon the results. Once you have very good results and you can say that the proposed technique is better than the current state of the art methods, then you can go for the publication. Third is you want to reach a broad audience. If you want that your work to reach a broad audience, then you can go for publication. But the condition is that you should have novel idea and the results are good than the previously proposed techniques. Your track record will improve. Obviously, your record will be improved if your research article is accepted. Next is you will add credibility to your and your team's reputation. Next point, you will improve your chance of promotion. This is again one reason you can consider when you are going to write a article for any journal. And last, which is the most important, that is you are more likely to obtain grants from the funding agencies. So if you are thinking that you want to submit any project proposal to funding agency, then you should have sufficient number of publications. So this is the important reason which is to be considered. So in these days all funding agencies are reviewing the proposal on the basis of the publications related to the funded project. So you should have sufficient and good number of publications. So these are the reasons to publish. Next, the basic techniques of research article writing. So before start writing your manuscript, you should have thought process, having some worthwhile results and ideas to publish. Again, it is related to the result part. You need some better new results to publish and you need to be able to interpret them correctly. So the interpretation of result is also important. Second is the structure, getting the right contents and expression in the right place. So if you have very good content and the mathematical equations and expressions you are going to add in the manuscript, then the chances of acceptance of article are more. And last is the style. So choosing the fewest and most appropriate words and using the rules of good grammars. So this is again the important technique which is considered in research article writing. Third is the structure of scientific article. So when we are talking about the structure, So the original research articles are typically structured in the basic order. IMRAD is a common organizational structure. So you can see here this there is a order of different sections. In the first part there is a title, abstract and keywords. So we will see in the coming slides that what are the different factors are to be considered. And next is the main text, which is related to the IMRAD. I stands for introduction, methods, results and discussion. So this is the basically the order which is proposed by the Elsevier. And the next part is basically conclusion, acknowledgement, references and supplementary data. This supplementary data is basically the optional part. Some journals they give the options that you can publish the supplementary data in the same journal, but in some cases the supplementary data is published in the another database and you can cite that supplementary data in the main file, in the main uh, article which is to be published in the another journal. So next part is the getting started, that you can how can you start the manuscript writing. First is the plan your manuscript. So in this plan, first is you should prepare the figures and tables. Yes, it is very important to create figures and tables before the writing begins. So you should have all the results and figures and tables which are basically the outcome of the research work. So you should have sufficient number of results and figures so that you can start your paper and compare the results with the others techniques. Okay, I have taken some examples of some figures. So this is the one example. You can see the complete figure the is labeled properly. Each and every sub figure is also labeled, and you can see some parameters or some variables are given below the sub figure. So I just want to tell that the figure should be properly labeled. It should be self-explanatory, and even some operations are written on the lines, and the caption is written at the bottom of the table. So it should be self-explanatory. And second example I have taken, this is the graph, and you can see here different colors are used to differentiate the outcomes of different methods. So you should have proper labeling and the proper, you can say, the color depiction so that we can differentiate the outcomes of different methods. Next is the example of one table. You can see here the different methods are compared on the basis of different outcomes. And in another example, this is again the example of one table. You can see here some special notes are given at the bottom of the table. Against this asterisk they have written some details, because sometimes it is not possible to give the detail within the table. So it means your tables and figures should be self-explanatory. Complete analysis or the comparison should be done from the figures and tables. And the next step is the writing of the methods. So write the method you are going to propose. So this method is basically in this section. Uh, you will respond to the questions of how the problem was studied. If your paper is proposing a new method, you need to include detailed information. So you can discuss the algorithm part here. You can use some flowcharts or some algorithms to describe that how the results are achieved. Next is write up the results and write up the discussion. So in most of the journals, result section is separated from the discussion. The result section should describe the results only, and the discussion section should put those results into a broader context. So in result section, you can analyze the outcomes. You can use some subjective evaluation or or objective evaluation. And keep in mind the results, the detailed discussion of the results should not be repeated in the discussion. And the next part is the write a clear conclusion. So this section shows how the proposed work advances the field from the present state of the knowledge. You should give clearer scientific justification of your work. Moreover, you can suggest future scope and point out those that are underway. Means you can discuss the future part of the article, that what type of modifications can be done to improve the results. So that can be included in the conclusion section. So future scope should be included in this part so that the reader can get the idea that what type of modification can be done. So if you are giving some future scope, obviously you will get more number of citations. So this is the one important factor to be considered when you are writing a research article. Next is write a compelling introduction. So if the introduction part is written properly, then the chances of the acceptance of the article are more. But the important part of introduction is that it should consider few questions which are to be taken care. The first part is what is the problem to be solved. This is the first question which should be considered in the introduction section. Next is, are there any existing solutions? Next part is, which is the best solution? Next is, what is the main limitation? If we are comparing the other methods, then what are the limitations? Then next part is, what do you hope to achieve? So these are the five questions which are to be considered in the introduction. First is problem to be solved. Second is what are the existing solutions. Third is which one is the best, and what are the main limitations, and last is what we are going to achieve. So all these five questions are to be answered in the introduction part. And next is write the abstract. It tells what you did and what the important findings in your research were. So you should discuss about the finding, that what are the different findings. In short, in abstract, the two questions are to be answered. First is what has been done and what are the main findings. So these are the two questions which are to be answered in the abstract. So next is the title. Now you can see that after doing all these important uh, discussions, then we can decide that what would be the title. So the title should be concise and descriptive. This is the main requirement. The title should not be very short and it should not be too much long, and it must explain the paper. So the title should explain the paper and it should attract the reader's attention. And if you are able to attract the attention, then obviously you will get more number of citations. So more citation will be uh, obtained if your title is very good, your title is impressive. So it should be explanatory, it should explain the complete idea of the paper. Then next is the select keywords for indexing. So again it depends upon the journals. So I recommend the author to see the author's guide so that they get the idea that how many number of keywords are admitted in the manuscript. And next part is the acknowledgement. So you can acknowledge the contributors. Sometimes some results are generated by the another author, and some fundings are given for the research, for the work which is to be done in the article. So you can acknowledge all those uh, persons or funding agencies in the acknowledgement part. And last is the write up the references. So we will discuss that how we can manage the references in the manuscript. We will see in detail. So next part is the select an appropriate journal related to your field. So this is again the important aspect which is to be considered. So when you are going to decide a journal, first of all you should use the experience that you can take the suggestions from the seniors, from your colleagues. And next is match your paper with the personality and scope of the journal. So it should not be out of the scope. If you are going to submit a article, it should come under the scope of the journal. Then match your subject with the journal's target audience. Obviously again it is related to the scope of the journal. Consider the impact factor and citation index of the journal. So you should select the journal having good impact factor and citation index on the basis of your uh, uh, quality of the article. If you think that the results are good and can be published in the journal having good impact factor, then you can choose that particular journal. Next is the weight up the journal prestige and the likelihood of the acceptance and the likely time until publication. Means you should have an idea that what are the chances of acceptance of your work, and how much time will be taken to publish the article. So this is again the important point which is to be considered. And have realistic expectations. So the journal should uh, comply the expectation of the author. Then next, scan the journals for one that matches your content and study design. So your matter should be related to the journal's scope. Again it is related to the second point. Be robust, and if the paper is rejected, select another journal. So if the paper is rejected, then you should select the another journal by doing some modifications proposed by the current journal. So you should submit the revised version to the another journal. And this is the another important aspect when you are going to select the journal, that is indexing part. So these are the four important indexing. First is the SCI, Science Citation Index. Second is the Science Citation Index Expanded, Scopus. And last is the Australian Business Dean Council, ABDC. So this particular indexing is for the article which are published by the M authors from MBA background, and these three are for the sciences and engineering section, and also valid for the pharmaceutical and biotechnology field. So these are the three main databases where the articles are indexed. So you should decide whether I can publish the journal to SCI, SCIE, Scoopers or ABDC. So SCI journals are the older journals, and SCIE are the journals which are the new journal uh, included by the Web of Sciences. And the another important factor, that is the impact factor. Impact factor is basically the metric which is used to compare the journals. It was devised by the Eugene Garfield, who was the founder of Institute for Scientific Information. So it is basically a metric used to compare the journal, and it is basically journal level metric, not a article level metric. So there are some another metrics which are used to compare the journals. Those are basically, you can say, there is a H factor, so that can also be used. But In these days, if you just want to decide the journal on the basis of impact factor, then this impact factor is basically computed from the last 2 years proceedings. So if you choose this impact factor as a metric to compare the journals, then it is basically the computed from the article published during the last 2 years proceedings. So in some cases, in some journals, there is another metric in which the published articles are considered in the last 5 years. So in this case, the impact factor is the most important factor which is to be considered to decide the journal. And next is prepare your paper in the correct format. And to decide the format, we can say there are three main formats which are considered by the different journals. First is the Microsoft Word, and second is rich text format, RTF, and third is the latex. So we will see in the coming lecture series that how we can prepare a manuscript using latex. So it is the most commonly used format in these days, and the most reputed journals, they are considering the manuscript in text files. And for formatting the references, obviously the formatting of the manuscript is the important part. And to format the references, you can use EndNote, Mendeley, and if you are using latex, then bibtex is the file which is normally used to format the references in the manuscript. So we will see in detail in the coming lecture series. We will see that how we can format the references in the manuscript if you are using latex. Okay, make the decision about the authorship. So you should have clear decision that to whom you are going to consider as a author. So the first author of the research paper is basically the main contributor. The person who did the work and wrote the paper is generally listed as the first author of a research paper. And for co-authors, other peoples who made substantial contributions to the work are also listed as authors. And if you want to include your mentor, then you should take the permission so that you can add him as a co-author. So this is again the important part, because once the article is published, you cannot uh, add or subtract any author in the manuscript. So before submitting the article, you should decide that to whom you want to add as a co-author. And next part is decide who is a contributor and who should be the acknowledged. So this acknowledgement part is also important. As I have already mentioned that in acknowledgement part you can include the person or any agency, funding agency you can include, or you can again you can say the person who have evaluated the results, who have done some subjective evaluation, you can consider his name in the acknowledgement. And this is the one example. So in this example, the author has acknowledged one funding agency, and the he has also acknowledged one person who has done subjective evaluation. So this is the one example. So acknowledgement part is the optional part, you can include in the manuscript, or uh, it will depend upon the author that whether he want to acknowledge the person or any funding agency. So length of the manuscript, it is again the important point which is to be considered. uh, and I recommend the authors to see the guide for the authors, because it is normally mentioned in the guide for the author that how many number of pages are acceptable. Normally 25 to 40 pages. Double spaced manuscript is accepted for the review purpose, and these are the some general guidelines given by the Elsevier. The title, it should be short and informative. Abstract, one paragraph, less than 250 words. This is the basic requirement. The next is the introduction, 1.5 to 2 pages. Methods, 2 to 3 pages. Results, 6 to 8 pages. Discussion, 4 to 6 pages. Conclusion, 1 paragraph. Figures, 6 to 8, 1 per page. So these are the some basic, you can say, the guidelines which are given by the Elsevier. Then table, 1 to 3, 1 per page. References, 20 to 50. Again, it is for the research article. If you are going to write review article, then the more number of references can be there. Top 5 reasons for the rejection of the papers. The first reason is that inappropriate or insufficiently described statics, and the second point is overinterpretation of results. Next is insufficiently described instruments algorithms, small or biased samples. So if you are using some data sets or some samples, then you should not be biased. The universally accepted samples should be considered. Length of the manuscript, this is the again important part. So it should comply the requirement or the specification of the journal. Text that is poorly written or difficult to follow. So the English part, English and grammar part should be considered. So if you want to improve the style and the structure of the article, and I suggest you to follow some tools which are available online. The first is Quillbot. So you can use this tool to remove grammatical errors, and you can structure the sentences and then translate. This is again a very common tool. Next is the Grammarly. This is again online tool. Then Scribbles. So these are the 4 very famous tools which are used to remove grammatical errors and the restructuring of the sentences. So I recommend the authors to use these online tools to improve the quality of the manuscript before the submission to the journal. Or I also recommend that the proofreading should be done from the native proofreader. So this is the another option, but sometime it is not possible to proofread the paper from the native proofreader. So you can use these 4 tools which are freely available. You can improve the quality of the manuscript before the submission. So concluding remarks, I would like to conclude my lecture. So writing for publication can be a challenging yet satisfying endeavor, and the successful production of a written product for the submission to peer-reviewed scientific journal requires substantial efforts. So efforts are needed to improve the quality, to generate good results so that we can get publish our article in the good journal. Few suggestions have been offered that may assist the authors to attempt, polish and perfect their approach to scientific paper writing. So these suggestions are to be considered, and in the coming lecture series I will try to cover the structuring of manuscript using latex, and I will try to explain that how can we improve the quality of the manuscript so that it it is accepted by the journals. So it is to be discussed in the coming lecture series. Thank you very much.